people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
And then, just with MMA, I'm gonna put boxing on the back burner for next year, but I'll be back after that. I can never leave boxing behind, but next year I'll be in the PFL season, so I want to give that all of my time, all of my training, and go out there and hopefully win $1 million, because that's really what means a lot to my career. And I believe that I have the potential to do it, but potential still needs hard work.
You heard it from Clarissa Shields herself. Next year, she's putting boxing on the back burner, the squared circle, for the octagon, for the cage. And what that essentially means is that if for any reason the Savannah Marshall fight doesn't happen this year, doesn't happen at any point.
The fight got pushed back. They were looking to do it in July.
I vaguely recall seeing an article or a post, a tweet or something stating that they now want to do the fight in September.
You know, if they can get the fight over the line for this year.
This will be the single biggest year the sport of women's boxing has ever seen, because that will then mean that we will have seen Taylor versus Serrano,
this year,
Alicia Baumgartner versus Michaela Mayer, and Savannah Marshall versus Clarissa Shields, all in the same calendar year. But that's if they can get this fight over the line.
And if for some reason they can't,
the year of 2023 ain't an option. Rescheduling the fight sometime next year doesn't sound like it's a viable route. Not when it comes to Clarissa, because she's not going to be available next year. She's going to focus all her energies on mixed martial arts.
That's what she's saying.
I won't lie to you. I'd be disappointed if the year of 2022 comes and goes and this fight don't take place. This fight between Savannah Marshall and Clarissa Shields doesn't happen, because in theory, there should be no hindrances. There should be no problems, no obstacles. They're both fighting under the Boxer Promotions banner on the Sky Sports network. So
it's an in-house fight.
There are no cross-promotional and network issues. In theory, the fight should be easy to make.
I don't know, man. What if for some reason it doesn't happen?
Well, we know what Clarissa would spend the year of 2023 doing, but what would Savannah Marshall do? Who would she fight if the super fight doesn't happen? Well, there is former middleweight champion Christina Hammer. She's an option.
She is.
Reigning 3-division champion Hannah Gabriels. She would be an option for Savannah Marshall as well as newly crowned undisputed super middleweight champion Franchon Cruz.
Those two were trading barbs by way of social media not that long ago.
Former unified super middleweight champion of Sweden, Eline Cederuz, would be yet another potential opponent option for Savannah Marshall if the Clarissa Shields fight don't happen.
So she wouldn't be completely up the creek without a paddle.
If for some reason the Clarissa Shields fight doesn't happen, I think the most prestigious fight, the most prestigious opponent of the four aforementioned potential opponents,
the most prestigious would be Franchon Cruz.
Now, Franchon was last in action on the DAZN platform on the undercard of Taylor versus Serrano. But given that Matchroom was actually willing to send Alicia Baumgartner over to the top-ranked side of things, I'd wager that they might be willing to send Franchon Cruz over to the Sky and Boxer side of things if Sky and Boxer have something substantial to offer Franchon Cruz.
Yeah, if they've got some money for her and a big fight that she could fight in, I don't think Matchroom would stand in the way.
There are even less politics and less bureaucratic red tape associated with a potential Marshall versus Hammer fight. Christina Hammer, who is promoted by Wasserman Boxing, Kale and Nisei Sarlin, the Sarlin brothers, they seem to have a good network relationship with the people over there at Sky, and that is yet another potential opponent option.
So's Eline Cederuz. She's not with a major promotional outfit.
Not to where there would be any promotional or platform issues. The same applies to 3-division champion Hannah Gabriels.
The way I see it, even if the Shields fight don't happen this year,
and Clarissa is too preoccupied with mixed martial arts for the fight to be rescheduled to sometime next year. There are still at least 4 tasty fights.
She's got options.
For anyone who's thinking that there are no other interesting fights left out there for Savannah Marshall, should the Clarissa Shields fight not happen, she's got options.
And at least one other undisputed title fight she could be a part of.
We'll see what happens. In men's heavyweight news, per tweet from Michael Benson, Deontay Wilder has confirmed that he will return to boxing and fight again. He was quoted as saying, "I can't stop right here. I must continue my journey. I have to. And, there was a lot of speculation about this as to whether or not Deontay Wilder, on the heels of 2 back-to-back losses to Tyson Fury,
Could he get it together psychologically in order to come back?
because if he can, there are still big fights out there for him that may or may not involve alphabet titles. I mean, we know that it looks a lot like the WBC. It looks a lot like they're leaving the door open for Deontay Wilder to reclaim the WBC title once again, the green belt.
In spite of coming off of 2 back-to-back losses, he's still ranked number 1 by way of the WBC.
You heard that right. Deontay Wilder in the last 2 years has done little more than lose to Tyson Fury, yet it hasn't caused him to lose any ground by way of the WBC's ranked standings. And the WBC president himself, Mauricio Suleiman, has suggested that they could stage a tournament to determine a new WBC heavyweight champion if Tyson Fury does retire and vacate. These are the current top 8 in the WBC's ranked standings, and you will notice that
Deontay's ranked at number 1.
It's funny how Dillian White has dropped all the way down to number 7 after having lost just one fight to Tyson Fury, whereas Deontay Wilder, after having lost 2 back-to-back fights to Tyson Fury, he stays at number 1.
It's funny how that works.
I've long felt that should Tyson Fury decide to call it a career off his latest victory over Dillian White, what the WBC would like to do is put that green belt right.
Put the WBC title right back in Deontay Wilder's hands.
This revelation is coming on the heels of Deontay Wilder having a statue in his native Tuscaloosa, Alabama, unveiled, erected in his honor, that his boxing career is not over. Naturally, the fight fans are fantasizing about what potential matchups might await Deontay Wilder upon his return. A potential Anthony Joshua fight, maybe an Andy Ruiz or Dillian White fight, perhaps a fight with Alexander Usyk. In truth, I'm not as optimistic as those fight fans are, because the same bureaucratic red tape that held up fights before is still in place now. Whether he returns by way of a Fox pay-per-view or a Showtime pay-per-view, those are all PBC affiliates, at least for the time being.
What are you expecting? That he's going to cross over to Matchroom and fight Matchroom fighters?
Top-ranked fighters? You're expecting that upon his return, Deontay Wilder will migrate over to Top Rank and face their stable of heavyweights? No, in all likelihood, if and when he returns, he's going to face...
people are still holding out hope that he will fight Anthony Joshua, win or lose, with Usyk.
I've seen conversations in reference to that potential matchup should Deontay Wilder return, and it looks a lot like he is going to return. Though the same bureaucratic red tape that held up that fight for all these years, it's still there. There are still network and promotional issues that need to be addressed.
Don't misunderstand me. There's still a lot of money in that fight.
Even if Anthony Joshua were to lose to Alexander Usyk in their upcoming rematch, there's still a lot of commercial value associated with a transatlantic heavyweight clash between Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua, battle of the former heavyweight champions. You can make a lot of money with that thing if you can get it over the line. The problem is...
the competing platform.
Wilder's not just going to cross over to the Matchroom and DAZN side of things, and I sincerely doubt that Anthony Joshua is going to cross over to the PBC and Showtime side of things. I mean, that bit of it, that situation, it hasn't changed. So anyone who's holding out hope to see those two boys lock horns now that we know Wilder's coming back, this is the issue that needs to be addressed. The same issue that was there before is there now.
That hasn't changed.
For the more near and immediate future, we have to wonder who it is that Deontay Wilder would be facing in what would be his rebound fight, his comeback fight, and almost immediately the name of Adam Kovnowski comes to mind. Adam Kovnowski, who much like Deontay Wilder, is coming off of consecutive back-to-back losses to Robert Helenius, and we all know Deontay Wilder, he's lost 2 back-to-back fights to Tyson Fury. Very recently, it was reported that Adam Kovnowski is in the running for a Derek Chisora fight in the United Kingdom. But all things considered, a fight with Deontay Wilder might pay Adam Kovnowski the same, if not better, money than that Chisoria fight.
Talking about Deontay Wilder's comeback fight here, that would be a more high-profile fight for Adam.
That would be a more high-profile fight for Adam Kovnowski than a Derek Chisoria fight. Derek Chisoria, God bless him, he still has a cult following and he can still get a guy paid, but not the same as Deontay Wilder can in this situation. And I've talked about this in the past, that if Deontay Wilder can pull himself together and return to the sport, there are lucrative fights out there for him. Maybe what the plan is, to put Wilder in there with Adam Kovnowski in a comeback fight while he waits for the winner of Ruiz versus Ortiz.
Should Andy Ruiz emerge the victor?
I mean, think about it this way. If Luis Ortiz versus Andy Ruiz is set to go down this summer, and Andy Ruiz emerges the victor, Deontay Wilder, he makes his ring return before this year is out. What you can then do is match those two boys against each other sometime next year.
Those are two very winnable fights for Deontay Wilder, even now.
Even whilst he himself is on the comeback trail, on the rebound, Adam Kovnowski's base style, his come-forward, aggressive volume punching, makes him vulnerable, makes him susceptible to Deontay Wilder's money punch, his straight right hand. Something very similar applies to Andy Ruiz, who, while he might have very fast hands and quick counters deep in the pocket, he also has very slow feet.
And he hasn't been very busy since pairing up with Eddie Reynoso. He's only fought once.
Fights Chris Arreola and looks less than spectacular, picks himself up off the canvas after being dropped, secures the W, secures a decision win, but we didn't see him again that year. And, he was going to try to do a thing with unbeaten Tyrone Spong, but he got pulled out of that to participate in a Luis Ortiz fight, presumably on the PBC side of things.
Those two fights could not only get Deontay Wilder back in the winner's bracket,
those two fights would allow him to do so in style. He could rack up 2 highlight reel knockouts over either Adam Kovnowski or Andy Ruiz, or both in that sequence.
It could beat both those guys.
Now, as far as world titles and world title contention, well, that really all depends on what happens with Tyson Fury, and what happens with Tyson Fury all seems to depend on what happens between Anthony Joshua and Oleksandr Usyk in their rematch. Most people feel that if somehow, some way, Anthony Joshua can figure out the puzzle that is Oleksandr Usyk and become a 3-time heavyweight champion, Tyson Fury will promptly come out of retirement and face him for the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world. But if Usyk beats Anthony Joshua for a second time, Tyson Fury might very well stay retired, vacate the WBC title, at which point the WBC themselves might put that title back in Deontay Wilder's hands.
If Tyson Fury stays retired and vacates it.
Even with news of Deontay Wilder's ring return, the world title picture for him and world title contention, it's a bit of a murky subject at this time. It's not quite clear, not right now.
I wouldn't be at all surprised to hear that Wilder's next fight is already penciled in, and it's against Adam Kovnowski.
It's the ideal guy for him to come back against. The ideal dance partner, a guy who's coming off of 2 back-to-back losses, just like he's coming off of 2 back-to-back losses.
It's the ideal plan of action to reintegrate Wilder into the heavyweight division.
Given his physical dimensions and physical advantages, coupled with the stylistic matchup, those are both very winnable fights for even today's Deontay Wilder. And finally, ahead of this weekend's lightweight contest between Gervonta Davis and Rolly Romero, Leonard Ellerbe was asked about Gervonta Davis, saying he's leaving Mayweather Promotions after the Romero fight, to which Leonard replied, "My focus, honestly, is on Saturday night. I don't think about anything else other than making this event as big as possible. And it's going to be huge."
I've been saying it week after week.
Ever since news broke that this would be the final fight of Gervonta Davis's existent contract with Mayweather Promotions,
Not a lot might change.
leaving Mayweather Promotions doesn't necessarily mean that he's leaving the Showtime platform or that he's leaving Al Heyman.
And if he's not leaving Showtime and he's not leaving Al Heyman, then not much is going to change.
Including the matchmaking, which seems to be everyone's biggest hang-up when it comes to Gervonta Davis, that maybe he is just as good as everyone says he is, but we'll never know until the matchmaking gets better. Well, if he stays with Al Heyman and he stays on the Showtime platform, the matchmaking we've been seeing in the past, it's not going to change in the present, and it won't change moving forward. They will be pulling opponents from the same pool of opponent options, that same stable of guys. I mean, if you're looking for him to face the winner of Haney versus Kambosos, you can fucking forget it.
Even though he just caught Devin Haney out.
Of course he did. How many years have gone by where we've seen Gervonta Davis call out the likes of Tevin Farmer, take jabs at the likes of Vasyl Lomachenko, all these other fighters at or around weights where he's campaigned how many times over the years have we seen Gervonta Davis do something semblant to what he's doing now with Devin Haney?
And you know, he might not even leave Mayweather Promotions.
Get a whiff of the latest news. Gervonta Davis has now said he may not leave Mayweather Promotions. I still feel I've got the best team in boxing. Mayweather Promotions, Al Heyman, my personal team. Whatever decision we make after this, I'm all for it. We come up with the best plans together as a team.
Listen, as soon as Gervonta Davis said that this would be the final fight of his existing contract.
Perhaps being a boxing fan for all these years has made me jaded and cynical, but I never expected much to change. Even if he ended up parting ways with Mayweather Promotions, that specific promotional outfit, that is just one of several promotional outfits that make up the PBC network. There's still Tom Brown, there's still Samson Lukowicz and Sean Gibbons.
I was never expecting much to change, if anything changed at all.
And I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if after Saturday night's fight, should Gervonta Davis emerge victorious, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if absolutely nothing changes and the situation remains exactly the same. I wouldn't be surprised to see Gervonta Davis take on Isaac Cruz in a rematch between those two boys right there on the PBC side of things, because I firmly believe they were never committed to fighting Ryan Garcia, and maybe Ryan wasn't committed to fighting them. Though all the same, I never expected that fight to come into fruition. I expect a rematch between Gervonta Davis and Isaac Cruz to come into fruition in the lightweight division beyond the Rolly Romero fight if Gervonta emerges victorious.
What if he doesn't?
If he doesn't, that's going to be pretty fucking embarrassing, because being honest, nobody views Rolly Romero as an elite level fighter, an elite level boxer. Nobody views him as one of these youngsters like a Bruce Carrington or a Keyshawn Davis that has a high ceiling and could go all the way. That has never been the view of Rolly Romero. That's never been the lens that anybody sees him through. And most people that have seen Rolly Romero in action, they're picking Gervonta Davis to spark him out.
Gervonta's the one that said the only reason he's fighting that guy is because this is the final fight of his Mayweather Promotions contract.
And that didn't come from me. It didn't come from some content creator, some YouTube author with some YouTube channel. That came from Gervonta Davis himself, which is what got the ball rolling for this entire story, that Gervonta Davis may end up leaving Mayweather Promotions. I never imagined that he would stray far.
Much less now that he's saying that he might not.
From the very beginning, I went as far as speculating that this entire story might have been an avenue of opportunity to garner this fight attention, because Rolly Romero, he don't bring the same fanfare to the table that Gervonta Davis does. If I'm being honest, I think Isaac Cruz has more fans than Rolly Romero at this point. The fight itself is a tough sell, because this is a pay-per-view we're talking about after all.
The fight's a tough sell.
So what if this entire story in its entirety was a marketing strategy, a PR stunt, in order to make people think this is Gervonta Davis's final fight under Mayweather Promotions, because that's the only way they could get this fight any attention?
Or what if it's not a PR stunt and Al Heyman talked Gervonta into staying with Mayweather Promotions?
Maybe they amend some things in a renewed contract. In any event, I never expected much to change beyond this Saturday's fight, and I still don't.
I never expected him to stray very far. I wasn't expecting him to go to Top Rank.
No, he'd have to work for his money over there. I wasn't expecting him to go to Matchroom.
I was expecting that one way or another, he'd stay in that biosphere they've got over there.
You remember what he told Gilly Kidd, Gilly Kidd's podcast, that he never actually demanded any of those high-profile fights with those other high-profile fighters.
So if he's not leaving Mayweather Promotions to fight them, why would he leave?